We'd like to welcome you to the New Life Recovery Show. My name's Donnie. Last name's Glover. The show is all about mental health. If I think better, I do better. Special thank you to Vineeth McCormick, the founder of New Life Recovery Center. They provide services for anyone suffering from addiction, not just drugs and alcohol, but gambling too. Our guest today is the one and only Clarence Tiger Davis. Good afternoon, Delegate. How are you?
Pretty good, Donnie. How you doing today? Hey,
You
look,
know,
you
you
asked
talk.
me how I'm doing today. After last night, I had to call the fire department to put out that fire because Kamala Harris set her kneecap on fire, kicking that boy in his butt. I'm doing good.
You know, you have taught me so much about veterans. Hey, Morocco.
Greetings, gentlemen. How y'all doing?
All right, Rock.
Hey, Tiger.
After I left you, I know you went to check that debate last night, boy.
Yeah, it was
I
big.
just telling Donnie she set her kneecap on fire, kicking him in the butt, boy.
It was like an electric kneecap. And then she started off by going over, extending her hand to shake his hand. And that threw a curveball on him. He didn't know how to handle it.
Hey, look, he should have known better. He's been used to dealing with these little European ladies, right?
Yeah.
Sister don't play that stuff, boy.
No, man, she came all the way live.
Yes, indeed. Wouldn't tangle with one of them for all the tea in China.
Yes, sir. Straightening out the world.
Mother of civilization, boy.
Donnie, how you been doing?
I'm grateful, big brother.
Yeah,
you know, both of you gentlemen are noted veterans. You've been noted advocates for the veteran community. It's always important to me. Now, I never served in the military. My dad did, but I always have the utmost respect. And speaking of last night, you know, one thing Trump has said about military people, he said suckers and losers, didn't he?
Certainly did. Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Hey, listen, I laugh at it. Here he is, a draft dodger who evaded the military with 6 deferments, claiming he had bone spurs. But, you know, wealthy boys can get doctors to say most anything, right? And so not only is he a draft dodger, but then he comes back and denigrates John McCain and his military service. And then if that wasn't enough, then he goes over there to Arlington and desecrate hallowed ground over there. Yeah. And guess what? And this is what gets me. People accept him. How can any veteran, especially those who served in combat, even use this guy's name? How can any family of a deceased veteran invite him to Arlington Cemetery? All that is political theater, and he's pimping the people, and that it ought to be a crime. This is why I have no more sympathy for him, you know, because I know he should go to jail. And I was one of those kind of person, hey, man, we can't lock up no ex-president, man. But look, when he gets convicted, I hope they put his butt under the jail and put him in chains and whip his butt every day.
Yeah.
In fact, I hope they put him in the cell with Jabbo Jones. Hey, Jabbo Jones could use him.
Yep. And you know, the thing that got me is they flipped the script and said that well, the Gold Star mothers and parents asked me to come to Arlington to lay this wreath on and blah blah blah. The Gold Star mothers or anybody else that is not a part of Arlington Cemetery has no authority to invite anybody or to bestow any kind of thing on somebody like what Trump did. You can't do that. And they tell me, I think it may have been a woman that was in charge of that section of the cemetery, and they kind of jacked her up from the way I understand it, and kind of bogarted and came in there for that political theater.
Yeah.
His Trump's brother's son was interviewed recently, and he said that the bone spur thing with Trump was cooked up with Trump's daddy and the old attorney that used to be for his daddy and used to work for Trump, Roy Coleman.
Oh my God,
yeah,
Roy Coleman?
Yeah, he was one of those attorneys, man, that got a lot of the gangsters off back in the day. And so he and Trump's daddy, man, put together this idea of bone spurs and got him out of service. Yeah. And then John McCain was the longest held prisoner of war. He was shot down over Hanoi. And once he got to the prison camp as a POW, they found out that his daddy, his granddaddy, or his dad, I think his father was a 4-star, a rear admiral. And they told McClain, said, "Listen, look, we're going to let you go." And he says, "Only the way that I leave is that you release everybody else." And so he stayed there all of those years as a prisoner of war. When he came back, if you ever noticed when he was talking and whatnot, he couldn't raise his arms above his shoulders, where they had beaten him and broken his arms and shoulders and everything. And then this clown Trump has the audacity to say, "I don't like people to get shot down." And then he began denigrating John McCain's service. The guy that sissed his way out of the military, and then he's going to make statements like this about active duty military right now, and then John McCain. And then as he continues to make these statements about veterans, like Tiger said, you got all these folk over there in his camp that are ex-military, and he's denigrating them like that. Now, if he gets to be president again, he will be commander-in-chief. He's like bigger than the 4-star generals and everybody else. He's the final word from a military standpoint, but yet he would have people up under him that he throws down on them like this and denigrates.
But like I said, I was at PT this morning. I do
Yeah.
Froze up, huh?
Well, I heard Tiger say he went to PT. That's where I'm going in a couple of hours, man, to go get my phys ed in, because you need to stay in shape for what we're having to deal with. Donnie, but a buddy of mine from DC is in town handling some business, and we were having dinner Sunday. He said something I hadn't really thought about. Now, I had thought about the fact that you've got people under Trump that probably come to him and say, "Listen, we got a thing called 2025, and sir, it's going to give you omnipotent power, and we can do this, and we can do that." And he says, "Well, what is it?" "Well, you don't really need to worry about it. All you need to do is sign off on this, and we'll push it through, and it's going to how you want." And he says, "Great. Will I still be able to go play golf every day and steal money from the American people?" "Yes, sir." And so you got these kind of people that are behind and up under Trump that are bringing him stuff to sign. These are the people that were running the country when he was president. These are the people that are reaching for all of the power and everything. They got him signing stuff. And if that 2025 works, if Trump gets, these are the people in the country. It can happen. We can win the popular vote, but we're going to have to very much protect the voting block. I can't think of the name of it right now. I'm drawing a blank. The Congress, the college, electoral college. We've got to protect the electoral college, because that's, I think, the route that they're going to go and try to use by shooting down the electoral college and stealing those votes out of there.
So I want you to talk about your advocacy for veterans.
Okay. Like Tiger, back in 1992, Tiger welcomed me to the Congressional Black Caucus Veterans Brain Trust in Washington, D.C. I testified before the House Subcommittee on Oversights and Investigations. I testified before Maxine Waters, Congressman Charlie Rangel out of Harlem, Kennedy, the congressman from Moline, Illinois. I testified, and after I finished testifying, Congressman Rangel appointed me as National Chairman for Veterans Employment and Training. Well, Tiger was already very much involved in the Black Caucus, so guys like Tiger took me under their wing. And so it introduced me to congressmen and senators and some other people on Capitol Hill. And when I came back to Atlanta, I was able to go on and help veterans like I was doing, but it gave me more impetus in getting people into the VA hospital for beds, for drugs, alcohol, and that kind of thing, where before it was closed to me. I ended up being the veterans representative for the Georgia Department of Labor. We got a new commissioner. New commissioner came on board. He had me to come lawsuits against the Labor Department because they weren't allowing us to take care of veterans like we were supposed to. So I thought the commissioner was bringing me in to fire me. He told me he wanted to offer me a position on his staff. So I took a couple of days to think about it, and he appointed me as assistant director for the Office of Veterans Programs for 131 unemployment Labor Department offices throughout the state of Georgia. Each one of them is manned by disabled veterans to provide jobs, education, employment, training to veterans. Each state at the Labor Department, each state has a section to provide those services to veterans when they come in the unemployment office. And so between having the impetus of the commissioner's office, plus the commissioner was a colonel, and eventually he made brigadier general. So when I traveled throughout the state to these offices, I carried the power of the commissioner and at the same time the brigadier general. And so through the Black Caucus, we've been able to honor one of the biggies was we recognize women veterans, and recognizing women veterans, we recognize and were able that were originals with the 6888 Postal Battalion. These were all a battalion of Black women. And during World War II,
In Europe.
the mail was backed up for 2 years. And soldiers weren't getting the mails from home or the wives, girlfriends for over, like I said, it was backed up 2 years. Out in the field or in the military installations. And so they brought in this battalion of Black women. Their commander was a Black woman named, I think it was Charity. And she was a major. And man, those women loved their commander. And so they sent them to Europe. And they said it was going to take about a year to unload this backlog. She set it up, Charity set it up, where they worked 24/7 around the clock. And these women were able to knock out that 2-year backlog of mail in less than 6 months. And it was great for morale. And it showed how great the commanding officer was and her troops, that battalion of Black women. And so they were awarded through the president's office the Congressional Gold Medal. That's the same award that Tuskegee Airmen received also.
Yeah, let me look. Her name is she ended up retiring as a lieutenant colonel, but it's Charity Adams Early. Now remember, they renamed Fort Robert E. Lee after Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg and Charity Adams. So it's now Fort Gregg Adams. And look, just for your information now, her son lives in Prince George's County.
Wow, now that I didn't know.
I was with him last year for the anniversary of the renaming and the opening of the museum, the 6888 presence at the museum now, because you got a women's museum there at what used to be Fort Robert E. Lee, and it's a beautiful setup because one of the things it has in there, and I had my wife and my sister take a picture there, is about those nurses from Howard University who tried to enlist in the United States Army Nurses Corps during World War One. But what happened is they denied them. And so, our guys served in French uniforms over there in France, right? And so what happened is they could then turn around and send those same nurses to Appalachia to take care of white folks during the flu pandemic, and all of that's in that museum there. And so anytime you're going down that road and checking it out, you need to stop by there. And by the way, we still don't have no information on the funeral or memorial services for Lieutenant General Gregg, because remember now, he's the first African-American to get 3 stars. He started off as E1, went all the way up and got 3 stars. He passed away in his home in Richmond. He was living over there by Manassas or Fairfax or what have you. But he passed away. His birthday, he turned 96 on May the 11th. And he's truly a great man. And one of the things,
Tiger, let me jump in here. We want to talk about on this show. This is the New Life Recovery Show. It's a mental health show. We look at, if I think better, I do better. I want you to talk about your advocacy for veterans.
Okay, well, that's how I got deep into the Veterans Affairs. When we were setting up the Vet Center program starting in 1979, Jimmy Carter signed the Healthcare Amendments Act in June of 1979. And Hushy Harris, one of our local guys here, was hired to set up the programs from New Jersey all the way down to Florida. And in Maryland, we had 3. And I just happened to be the Vet Center leader for one of them. Now, what we did, we recognized not only the symptoms of PTSD, but PTSD had been qualified under, it was DSM-3 back then. It might be DSM-6 now. That's the diagnostic statistical manual that classifies mental health illnesses or what have you. And so once it became a legitimate mental health issue, then we could provide the treatment for it. And we had some great therapists here in Baltimore dealing with these young people. And what I'm talking about, young people, they were no more than 5 or 6 years younger than me, but they still was young. But we had one guy by the name of Jim Workman, who was a therapist. Young fella came in, he was a great artist, and he was doing some work, like putting them calendars together with military dates that affected Black people, and a beautiful piece. The guy was a genius, artistic genius. But in Vietnam, he was trying to do a portrait of his sister, and he couldn't remember what she looked like.
Wow.
And when he come home, because he was blocking everything out, and that's part of the issues with the PTSD. Some folks can call it avoidance, and then you can become real lethargic or what have you. But at any rate, Jim Workman brought this cat back from not being able to recognize his own reality to the new reality that he now lived in. Which was a beautiful thing to watch how a guy progressed through that. So PTSD was real. The old guys was looking at all these daggone crybabies and stuff like this, and look, it happened in every war. They just call it by different names, whether they call it shell shock or whatever, or combat neurosis or whatever. PTSD is real. And see, so the younger guys are benefiting from the work that we did, Rock, because now, hey, look, it's presumptive. And so you go in there now and you've been in a war zone PTSD is presumptive and you can get 100% disability. We got guys, man, and still, we still got this little disparity thing between the rating system for blacks and whites. You know, because when I was in, and this is when we started fighting it, a little white boy in Germany jump off a tank, twist his ankle. He getting 30% disability, which means if he could pass the exam to get into Harvard Medical School or law school, the VA would pay everything for him, right? Plus give him a check every month to live on, right? We had guys coming through our vet center who was shot down out of helicopters, crashes, the whole works, got scars every day gone where, man? Can't draw a dime. We got guys who had wounds, shrapnel, because they was black. We got guys who had shrapnel wounds where, you know, they pull up the pants leg and you could see the drainage coming out of the shrapnel wounds in their legs. I remember one Bunny around the 2600 block of Chase Street. Bunny, the only, you know, he got fired from General Motors because that anger and hostility, you know, hey, man, he'd whip up a supervisor in a minute, okay? But that was PTSD, but he couldn't get nothing. But
let me shift over to Rock. Rock, you know any success stories?
Yeah, I'm one. I was after Vietnam, you know, I got back from Nam in 69. I got out in 1970, January 70. I went on with life, got married, got the Woody station wagon, the 1.2 kid, the picket fence, and everything was going good. And then some things happened. The bottom fell out, lost my job, lost my wife, my child. Started wrestling, trying to get myself together and couldn't understand what was happening. And so this was affecting my life, my livelihood, my job. And so back in Nam, when something was threatening your life, you took it out or you avoided it or made amends to it. In this case, I'm schizophrenic because I'm walking around hurting, but I'm trying to act like I'm okay, but I know something's wrong. And so I ended up homeless for 2.5 years. And so on the streets of Atlanta, I knew every drug house, every drop zone, every piece of the subterranean culture. I was back in Nam. I was back in jungle mode. And I existed like that for 2.5 years. And eventually I went to the vet center and I went some other places and started getting some help and started looking at this thing and found out I had something called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the interesting thing about the PTSD that I went through and many others is that when I was out there in the streets in the homeless arena, every year around Thanksgiving to about the first week of February was when I would get in fights, is when I would get locked up for problems out there in the streets. And it became a pattern and I didn't realize it. Well, once I started getting some help, I came to understand that from Thanksgiving to the first week of February was what they call trigger dates. Tiger was talking about the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that's used by psychiatrists, psychologists, medical professionals. That's their Bible. It talks about PTSD, but it also talks about schizophrenia, paranoia, blah, 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 blah. PTSD is a whole different animal. And so what I was able to discover was that I went to Vietnam on January 31st, 1968. On the date that I got to Vietnam, 10 hours after I got there, all heck broke loose because it was the beginning of the Tet Offensive of 1968. The Tet Offensive, the after action report showed that for 6 months, the Viet Cong had been digging tunnels outside, underground, outside every military installation in Vietnam, South Vietnam. They popped up out of the ground at 2 o'clock in the morning and attacked every military installation. But before I went to Vietnam, I was on leave. So I was on leave during Thanksgiving, celebrating here in Atlanta with family and friends. Then I went through Christmas with family and friends. Then I went through New Year's, family and friends. But every now and then I'm partying, I look over the TV and it would say 200 killed today in Vietnam. And I'm saying, when my leave is up, I'm going to that place. So I ended up on Vietnam on the worst day of the more people died on that day in 1968 than any other time in the 10-year war. So when that time of year would come around, Thanksgiving to February, those were trigger dates where subconsciously my mind was saying, you had no control over your life back in 1968 because they gave you a gun, dropped you out there in the middle of hell and told you to survive. Well, now that I'm back here, when those feelings would start to come around, psychologically, I'm back to 1968. And I'm thinking about watching TV and knowing about folk dying over there. And so they're called trigger dates. So whenever those trigger dates would start to come around, my inner Morocco would know. The outward Morocco had no clues. So I was in conflict. And so once I understood, I got into the profession of working with veterans and helping veterans, I was able to apply those same veterans that sat down at my desk that was suffering from PTSD and many of the other maladies that come with PTSD and the war.
Hold that thought. Tiger, tell me about the veterans today. The cats coming home from Afghanistan, Iraq. Is the PTSD that they experience the same as during the Vietnam era?
Yes, it is. In some instances, it may be even be worse. Okay, because many of these guys that are coming home now, with those IEDs or what have you, man, those explosions on those highways, like in Nam, you might go down this path and then one of them bouncing Bettys that come up and blow you apart. Well, that's one. But then what happens is you riding along in a convoy and one of my IEDs go up and the whole daggone truck go apart. And so there's 4, 5, 6, and even more of you that are damaged. And the damage that's done is you're left, can't hear, can't see. You might lose a limb or something like that. But, and so in that sense, it was more dangerous or more horrifying in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah.
And you can see them coming because we got them all in our families. Okay. But here's the difference now. Okay. We got all the women too.
Yeah.
Because, when we were in the military, Rock, 1.5 to 1.6% of the military was female.
Right.
Females did not go into combat zones unless they were nurses. They may have been there. But in this war, nearly 20% of the military is female. Yep. And they are doing all the carrying on all the tasks that previously they was prohibited for them. Okay. And so now they're coming home with the same problems as men. But here's the kicker. Most of them are mothers.
Yep.
I don't care what you say about modern society or whatever. Women are still the primary caretakers for our children. So what happens to children when their mother comes home and she's suffering from PTSD? That's the major question. I've talked to people at Morgan to try to get them to do a study. I even talked to them over at Hopkins, and they say, well, the one colonel, but she's gone to Washington State now. But somebody needs to be on top of that, because what is the impact on our future if our women are coming home with PTSD and all these other maladies? And so whenever I see the sisters, I'll be watching over them. Because I know what we saw after Vietnam, and I know for women, it has to be even tougher because, look, women always deal with the stress of raising kids anyway. The mothers are the ones that hurt. But then also on the other side of that, children love their mama, okay? Every boy wants to buy his mama a house. It's the mother that's important in terms of guiding and putting the kids on the right track. Now, that's in our community. Now, what happens is in the broader community, the European thing, they always want to make the man this and the man that. And so they judge our community. Ain't no fathers around and blah, blah. Look, come on, man. It's always been the women in our community. You know, the homes didn't have no fathers in it. Hey, the women did the job. Sometimes they worked 2 jobs and then they took care of their children or what have you. The women have always been the strong ones in our community who have moved us from one point to the other, and it didn't matter about the men. But somehow now we are viewing ourselves through the prism of our master. And
Rob,
terrible thing. I mean, psychologically.
Now,
Rob,
I'm dealing with women veterans that are psychosexual trauma. For example, to get a woman veteran that was, and she went in back, in the 20s, and young, impressionable, didn't know any better. She wanted to be a nurse. Started out as a nurse, but she was sexually assaulted.
Oh my goodness! Yes,
Superiors, and she didn't report it because I put it on myself, or nobody would believe me, and so she did. And that was her therapy. Now, this is the way PTS works again on a different level. As a nurse, taking care of and helping others and making a difference, positive difference in their lives. That was her psychological therapy. And so she goes all these years. And in the last couple of years, the system and the electronics and everything, and she felt like a dinosaur. She's starting to get this and the technology. And so she says, I presume it's time for me to step down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, like when we look at our families, now my granddaughter is an Iraqi woman.
Finish your point. Once she stepped taking care of people as a nurse, then the PTSD started to, and so she was in a tailspin. And she talked to me, and I was finally able to establish where the story. And a couple of months before, I had met a Black woman psychologist. Had any people for PTSD sent to her. So I sent this Black woman to. She called me up later and she said, Morocco, thank you for sending me to her. She's wonderful. We're about the same age. And she worked with her. We were able to get her 100% disability in this PTSD for over. That's just another how insidious it can be.
Tiger, tell me about the spouses of military people. Does the PTSD rub off on the spouses, the children?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, because everybody's walking on eggshells.
That's right.
Male or female,
mm-hmm.
They got. Well, the DSMC will take you through all the 8 defense mechanisms. Crying, sadness, and the person is going through these things, but not realizing what's happening to them.
But
the reaction, first they startle family members. Then once they pass the startle phase, and run away from it. So everybody's walking on eggshells. And so now, why is the PTSD fallout? And So PTSD in the family structure comes a factor with the carrier of the PTSD, that they're affecting family members and those in the home environment. And the thing about the person with the PTSD, recognize or realize that they have an issue or that they're going through something. To recognize, like I did, where I know something's wrong, and then you don't want to admit that you've got something like that. And again, then you get to the schizophrenia, different personality. So what you're doing is you're knowing something's wrong with you, but you're not quite sure. Hide it. So you're walking around people, friends, family, and you're acting deep down inside, you know that you're off kilter.
Okay. Morocco, your screen keeps freezing up on you. I don't know if you know that. Come on, Tiger.
Yeah, look, you know, I've looked at it from World War II, and I look at it from my experiences with my granddaughter or my daughter-in-law and all of them, okay? Because my granddaughter, she's 45 years old, she's 80% disabled, but her problem is the headaches, okay? And that's a major issue as well. I don't know whether it come from that burn stuff or whatever. All right, but her husband, who's a Marine, she was Air Force, he's a Marine, he gets 100% disability. But let me tell you, this thing can come back on. You can be going through your life, you know, and bury it, push it back, and then it'll come out. Let me give you an example, and I'm going to try to be as brief as possible.
You mean like a relapse?
You can call it relapse or whatever, but it's like a flashback is what we call it, okay? And it can come back on you 40 years later. Here's what happened. Every Black History Month, we declared the last Saturday of February as African American Patriots Day. So the day before that, on that Friday, I would stand up in the legislature and give a presentation on what we was doing. This time we was doing it on the 761st Tank Battalion and the 183rd Engineers. And you know, the 761st Tank Battalion was probably the best tank unit Patton had. They're the ones who liberated one of our elite units, which was all white, the 101st, at Bastogne, which was the deciding battle, you know, as the U.S. and Allied forces pushed into Germany. What happened is, once I started talking about him, Doc McClellan, of Western Maryland, redneck, starts to the front where I sat in the House of Delegates, tears screaming from his eyes. Because see, up to this point now, you know, Black folks got tired of me getting up talking about Blacks in the military and all of that, right? So he comes walking to the front, tears streaming down his eyes. And he says, Tiger, can I have the mic? I say, sure, Doc. You know, I'm confused here now, right? And befuddled. And then he started talking. He said, Tiger, I was 101st Airborne. I was at Bastogne. I never thought I was going to see home again. We was in the snow over our head, and the death was coming in from the sky. And every time we look up, the incoming was coming. You didn't even have time to breathe in between explosions or what have you. And so he began to talk. And then he said, then they broke through. The 761st, all Black. He said they're Black Panthers. And then he caught himself because he didn't know whether he was supposed to say black or not, you know, because they get confused on those things. And so I said, it's all right, Doc, go ahead. And then he started saying, those boys, and then he tried to correct himself on that. But that was the story. The 761st Tank Battalion saved one of our elite units in the most major battle of all. And Doc had that flashback and couldn't stop crying for 2 days. You hear me? And he needed help. Now, understand this. This was probably in the 1990s, and the war had that we're talking about 50 years ago. Okay, and it came back on him. But now, one of the things I didn't talk about at that time I was going to get to was the 333rd Artillery Unit, which was probably one of the best artillery units in the United States Army, right? But what happened, they put some sorry-ass white troops who were poorly trained with them, attached them to them. And when the Germans started moving, they ran. The brothers stayed and fought, and 13 of them, 11 of them got separated, right? And they were at this little town called Wareth, W-A-R-E-T-H, W-A-R-E-T-H, because they're called the Wareth 11. There was about 11 families in this village. 3 of them was Allied sympathizers, and the other 8 were Nazi sympathizers. The Allied sympathizers hid them in their barns and stuff and fed them and all that kind of stuff. Then when the Nazis came, and the brothers knew how vicious the Nazis were, they left the safety, went out into the fields so they could be captured, so that they would not have the Nazis hurting those people who befriended them. The Nazis then captured them, and while they were alive, they cut off all of their body parts, and you know what I'm talking about, gouged their eyes out and cut off their ears, all while they was living. Now you look it up, because this year we're going to try to make the United States pay for that, because we're going to make them remember. They don't want to remember. Werewolf 11. Now, when I was overseas and I went up there through Belgium, I thought I didn't know what it was until I got home. And then once you know this kind of stuff, it bothers you. You know, it just keeps hitting you in the head. But look it up. This is why, I get so pissed off at Black leadership, because they do not recognize and pay homage to the extraordinary services of African Americans. Okay, they will talk about Medgar Evers, but they never say he was World War II hero. They will talk about a Harold Washer, but they will never talk about him being a hero. All these guys came home and got on the front lines of the war back here because they had that double V thing in their head. Victory over Hitler and racism over there, and victory over racism here at home, because that's what kept us going. That's why some of us, like Geronimo Pratt and others, joined the Black Panthers when they came home, because this was a psychological thing that helped them overcome the war. Because the first question is, how could you be over there killing yellow people for the white man? So, hey, how do you deal with it? You get involved. Parham Mitchell was one that came home after World War II and became a leader in the Black movement. Mayor Dinkins, one of the first Black Marines. You look all over, they're everywhere. Dellum's daddy, Ron Dellums, he served with you, but his daddy was a big-time hero. And so all of these guys come home, they get engaged in the struggle back home. This becomes a catharsis for them. My first day home, I'm locked up in jail and beaten by the cops. This was my catharsis, right? Because I went down and joined Corps, because I wouldn't join the NAACP because I thought they was a little soft. So I joined Corps. And this was how we dealt with some of our stress that was in us, because, sometimes you think, well, I was really a sucker, right? Hey, maybe I was a sucker. I don't know. Maybe Trump was right. But you begin to think about those kinds of things, and did you do the right thing, or why did you do this, so on and so forth. But having something to do becomes a catharsis. People like Al Bunbury came straight from the jungles in Vietnam and then became Rookie of the Year, didn't he?
Wow. I didn't know that.
He hit about 340. So he was a lieutenant in Vietnam, man. Rocky Bly came home and go straight to Pittsburgh after he recuperated. But when you come home and you got something to do that consumes you, you bury it.
So let me shift over to Morocco. Morocco, do you find being an advocate is therapeutic?
Once I got straight and everything, got a grip, then all of those trials and tribulations that I was suffering, no answer. Well, now I understand the answer. And did prepare me But again, let me show you how PTSD works a different way. Native Americans, and my wife and I were invited out to the Blackfoot Indian Nation. 40 and Blackfeet, well, Native Americans in warfare, they would scalp, and they were so barbaric, but there was a method to the madness. Take your eyes in death, then in the afterlife, you won't be able to harm me. And so many Native Americans went to Vietnam, and their PTSD, most of us would look at part over here, the war and what it does to the human body and everything. Native American culture of that. So that's no big thing to them. But PTSD from a whole different perspective. We lost the war and came out of there after 10 years. We're withdrawing with honor. We left out of that war. We did not win it. And so many Native Americans came back in disgrace because they went back to the reservations. They went back to their culture, and they went back in disgrace. Their war. And so that was another little.
Let me ask you about Sugar Bear.
Morocco, I'm gonna ask you to go out and come back in. Your screen keeps freezing up.
Who you talking about? Me?
We can't hear you complete sentence yet. So I want you to come out. Yeah, I want you to come out and go back in.
Yeah, because look, man, I want to hear what he was talking about. We got another partner down there in Texas. I got a call this morning. Well, sometime after this call. I gotta find it. He lost both legs, in Vietnam. That's Sugar Bear. He's down in Texas. I'm gonna give him a call after this. And see, that's the one thing we got. We got one another, and we could call one another. My generation, we brothers.
I bet you got a mean phone book.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And go ahead and plug the thing about the black veterans.
Okay. Yeah, we were talking about those guys at Werewolf 11. Did you ever look that up?
No, you said you had an event coming up.
I just got back from Louisville. The event, now I'm going to show this again as a painful thing. Normally on this Friday that's coming during the CBC, we would have a Veterans Brain Trust. This is the first time in 35 years that the veterans will not be getting together over there in D.C. for the Congressional Black Caucus event.
Why?
Well, I don't know the real reasons, but I know it's under Sanford Bishop's responsibility. When we had Charlie Rangel and Ron Armstead,
Corrine Brown
were the founders, and then you had some other folks who followed, like Congresswoman Brown out of Florida. And even Anthony Brown, and then we had Bernice, out of Texas. She just died a few months ago, right? And they were all very supportive. But then these staffs that run these offices are making decisions that don't make sense because they think they're above all else. Now, for the first time, man, we're not going to have a Veterans Brain Trust? This is insanity, man. We've always had a Congressional Black Caucus Veterans Brain Trust. And all of a sudden now, we don't, because there's somebody new in charge. And the staffs are running those things. And so, hey, Rock, and Sanford is down there below you down there by Macon, man. We're going to have to find some way to see what's going on with them, man.
Okay, Rock, come on, tell me about the Native Americans.
So, as I was saying, the Native Americans, they came back in this. Still was the way many of them experienced PTSD. During the Black Caucus a few years ago, to bring in about 6 million infantry from Korea. The record book says it was all came under. They were yellow, and they ran, and they all of these years. Well, we brought 6 of them from the 25th Infantry and had them to have a panel discussion. And this went into congressional records. This was an opportunity to correct from Korean War. They said that by them being an all-black unit, the white officers did not want to command them.
Yeah, 24th.
The ones that they did, white officers that were alcoholics, had social problems, unfit lead men. And so counter combat, the white officers ran, and the brothers, let us kill, let's get out of here. The brothers fell back, and then themselves them, and they went back into battle, and they gave testimony. Was able to correct the records. But now this is another way that you can look at PTSD. They said at 2 o'clock at 3 foxhole because they knew that they were coming and it was going to be bad. So now here it came under attack, and you could hear whistles blowing, everything. And here comes a wave. And the guy said they were in the foxhole bodies. And then it started banging on pans, and here they come again. The body. So now it was so many Chinese that they didn't even have weapons. They just and picked up weapons off the dead Koreans. And my mind, as these men were testifying, fish in a barrel, that they were running right past the foxhole. They back there could get them so that they would. These were the men of the 24th, and this was the fighting that they in fear, and the records were cleaned up. But these men, all of these years, they all see, because can you imagine in combat and you shooting the enemy down and it's running right?
Yeah. Yeah, you keep freezing up, Rock. But let me see if I can pick that up a little bit, Rock, and this is kind of for you too. Command Sergeant Major Samuel Jenkins, he lives in Augusta. He's about maybe 92, 93. He and my uncle were with the 24th Infantry when all of that stuff was going on. But he stayed and retired as a Command Sergeant Major. All right, my uncle came home and got kicked out of the 82nd Airborne, okay, because he was an alcoholic, and they said he was malingering because he would go off base to get him some liquor. He had to have that liquor because that was his way of self-medicating. In fact, I'm going to try to get his stuff straight now. But whenever you get a chance, look up Command Sergeant Major Samuel Jenkins down there, okay, because what we found with a whole lot of those guys coming out of the 24th at our congressional.
Where was the 24th? Help me out.
All right, the 24th Infantry is one of the Buffalo Soldiers unit. In fact, it was the last Buffalo Soldiers unit. You know, after the Civil War, they established 6 black units. 4 of them were retained, the 9th and 10th Cavalry, the 24th and the 25th Infantry Regiment, right? And so the 24th was the last one. They lost their colors in the Korean War. And that's one of the most difficult. They said they was cowards, but there was white officers. This is what
The one
was talking about. Okay, their officers ran. Okay, and those brothers, when they come and you hear them talk, they cry. They cry because of how they was treated and how they was classified. And they still live in that pain. Now, understand, they all 90 years old or above. And if you see them, they'll still cry about it. We've got guys who was at Iwo Jima. And this is when my man, what's our black director and producer name, the little fellow?
Spike Lee.
Spike Lee, yeah. Spike Lee jumped on Clint Eastwood because when he did that, what Flags of Our Fathers, he didn't show no black people. And so we had these brothers from Iwo Jima who would sit and cry because they were not respected or recognized. That too was a contributing factor to some of the stress and acrimony that some of our brothers face. Because see, look, no matter what PTSD white folks suffered, we suffered an add-on, which
Even
was
those
that
black
racism.
soldiers that you told me about who came home and got lynched.
Yeah,
uniform.
They come home and got lynched because they can't wear them uniforms. And in fact, I've got some of them in my stack over here. I was going to make a presentation on them down in Louisville. But now here's what we all got to focus on. This year is the 80th anniversary of the ending of World War II. We still have some of our fathers alive, even though they're close to 100. We need to tell their story while they are alive, and we need to make America give them their proper due. That's why that Werewolf 11, I want you to look that up, Donnie. We ain't going to let America get away with that. Because what they sweep that stuff up under the rug, or the fact that the United States, Eisenhower, Churchill got with Charlie de Gaulle and said that the liberation of Paris had to be white-only liberation. No black soldiers, okay, will march through the Arc de Triomphe. But the problem they had that they had to overcome was France was defeated in 1940. Okay, and the Nazis had taken over. So the only people that were still fighting in the free French was what? The Senegalese. So they were the only real active warriors that France had. So what they did, they just pulled white boys from everywhere.
Did you say the Senegalese?
Senegalese, yeah, Senegal. The African colonists, colonialists. The conquered nations of Africa. They were the only ones that were still fighting. And so what about them? They didn't even want to give them guys veterans benefits. But look it up, and this is the title, because BBC will uncover those papers, right? White-only liberation of Paris. See, when you look at all of this and what they have done to us and how they have swept all of our contributions under the rug, it's a shame. I mean, if the Nazis had done that to white boys, they would be paying some reparations, now wouldn't they?
Yeah.
They gouged out their eyes, cut off their body parts and stuff like that, and laughing and joking while they doing it.
Tiger talked about the 369th Harlem Hellfighters.
That was the
infantry unit. Yeah, during World War, the all-black infantry unit.
Mm-hmm.
And all that kind of stuff. They said,
yeah, but
we infantry. We ain't gonna do it.
That far. We want to take care of our fathers from World War II, and
so they said,
look up that 333rd 333 artillery unit. That was the finest artillery unit in the United States Army, just like the 761st Tank Battalion.
369th, when they got to front, they fought along stayed in combat over 8 months, and they took this, but they never lost an inch of ground. And when the war was over and they got there, and gave them as the cross the gap.
Cross the gap.
The medal, and so these men were recognized. Also, Tiger was talking first tank, Black Panthers. Went in the Buchenwald. They were a gentleman was about 3 blocks from east now, but I grew up. His name was the Atlanta Daily World newspaper. Well, during World War II, when they found out that his family, they made him part of the press for the army. So he accompanied went in the Buchenwald. When they went in the Buchenwald, the German Jews, and they were throwing them in the ovens, getting ready to kill them. 61st Road in there. And 50 years later, they took some of those guys back and took pictures with them like they did 50 years before, some of those Jews. And they took pictures of those. When I saw this black man on top of that tank coming to save us from those ovens, he said, and so when you look up Buchenwald prison and the act, those pictures, many of them that are documented, were done by Mr. W.A. Scott, a family in Scott newspaper.
Morocco, I gotta tell you, it's been a real pleasure, but your screen has been freezing up, and we don't get to hear the whole thing you're saying. So, Tiger, take us on home. Bring it on, sum it on up, and we're gonna get out of here.
All right. Well, look, what I need everybody to do is to focus on the 80th anniversary of the ending of World War II, beginning with the Battle of the Bulge. Well, we actually should have started with the landing at Normandy, but the Battle of the Bulge will begin December the 16th, 80 years ago. And from that point, the liberation of concentration camps, then the dropping of the bombs on Japan, because the victory over Europe Day was what I think it was about May the 11th or something like that. But then we will then defeat the Japanese. What role did African Americans play in that? Their story need to be told this year, and that's one of the things, Donnie, that I'll be working on. That's a kind of a love of life.
What about services for veterans?
You mean the current veterans?
Yeah, services.
Yeah, we're going to continue to work on that, because we do have a VA right now. We're trying to. We got black veterans. Rock is one of the co-chairs of Black Veterans for Kamala Harris. Okay, that's our first mission right now, is to win, so that we can still have that access for our issues before the Department of Veterans Affairs. Right now it's Dennis McDonough, and we got an ear. We got an ear because Dennis McDonough used to be one of the chief of staffs for the Obama administration. And so we've got a good ear over there, but we've got to win with Kamala Harris, okay? Because we can never let that draft dodging coward and treasonous bastard win no election in this country again.
Yep.
That's it.
He's a traitor, isn't he?
He's a traitor.
Yeah.
He's a scumbag, coward. That's what he is. You know, and sit around and go try to bully somebody. Well, let's put him in that jail cell and let him bully Jabbo Jones. Okay.
Rocco Coleman, Tiger Davis, I love you both. We got one more comment. But thank you for all that you do to help others. I imagine it's very therapeutic to do the work that you do. You easily could be doing something else, but I think it's beautiful, it's noble, it's very loving that you take the time to help other people get better, especially with PTSD and schizophrenia and all of the various things, including this new generation that's coming home from Iraq, Afghanistan. I salute you, man. I salute you. My name is Donnie Glover. This show is brought to you by New Life Recovery. If I think better, I do better. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Take care. Talk to you later, Rock.
All right. Take care, Donnie.